Okay, hi friends, and welcome to our continuing Dissipation of Glamour Initiative webinar. And we're working on something very interesting at the moment. We're working on the rules of the road, which are so very important, and we have to try to understand them as much as possible. So I think that may lead to a good discussion. And we will At the end, I'd like to just read, without any commentary at all, the 6 rules of the road. You know, when we finish our discussion, then we'll get into our meditation, which either I will do or Tuija will do. I'm not sure. We'll see at the time. And for right now, I'm disappearing. There we go. Okay. Right now, I'd just like to do a little bit of an alignment here. Have this wonderful map in front of us, don't we? It's just so beautiful. The whole idea of the planetary hierarchy and what it includes, and then the solar hierarchy above it, which the planetary hierarchy reflects all the way up to the head of our local, well, DK at the time called it kind of a universe. It's not the way we use the term universe these days. We think about the grand entirety when we use the word universe, but at least for the moment, it's our kind of our local system beyond which we cannot think about very much. So let's gathering together as we are, and all some 30-something of us, and offering ourselves in the soul-infused state as much as possible, coming together in that consciousness of soul and that feeling of presence coming together. Wherever we may be, but it's one being, really, and it's one consciousness. And under the instruction of the hierarchy and using the methods that are sanctioned by the hierarchy as presented by Master DK, we seek to contribute to the clarification of the astral problem. Since most people are either astrally polarized or working karma monastically, it's a very, very big problem. And the intelligence, the soul-infused intelligence of humanity has to prevail. And the more intelligent and soul-illumined we become, the less we will be subject to demagoguery, a blatant appeal to the worst that is in man, with all of its selfishness and materialism and lies and the whole thing. So we have to do our best to lift human consciousness. And we can do that from the inside out. The occult work is extremely important at this time. It's not seen. And, there is the work in the world which we can do and do, and, it's important, but we can't let up on our esoteric conditioning of the outer forms and the outer relations. And, we may be kind of unsung, really. Nobody knows. Very few know. But then very few know about the hierarchy as well. And believing as we do and committed and convinced as we are, we persist in these inner esoteric techniques and approaches which will make a real difference. The triangles and invoking the presence of the Christ and committing our life intention to Him, and the eradication of glamour, and strengthening the soul of our nation and of the nations, and of course trying to support the whole thing financially as well. We do all that knowing that we are helping and we are working in alignment with the hierarchy. So with those thoughts in mind, we'll just sound an Om to confirm. Thank you. So just to welcome you, as I try to do quickly, and then not again if you join later, but okay. Alexandra, Anna, Annette, Bianca, Carl, Catherine, Deborah, Francois, Frederick, Gregory, Jan, Jean-Pierre. There's Jo, she's on both sides at the same time. Joan, Joanne, John, Yoke, Yopie, Karen, Catherine, Keith, Lourdes, Margot, Marissa, Olivia, let's see, Kin An. Okay, this is a Vietnamese name, and we do welcome you. I'm sorry that I can't pronounce well. Nguyen Ton Nu. So maybe, Anne, you were here with us, perhaps, in the Temple of Silence. Someone named Anne was. Maybe that's you. Sandra, hi. Stephen, Susan, Suzanne, Veronique, Yvonne, and Zenaidi. And here on the other side, BL, Joe, Michael, and Tuija. And we'll try to keep things going as they should be. Just want to let you know a few things in terms of general announcements. I've been working very hard on a treatise on white magic. There are now 105 programs that are completed, and they're going to be, I think, Joe, correct me if I'm wrong, but both on YouTube and also on Makara. So, yeah.
Currently on YouTube. We will have them on Makara in a couple of weeks.
Okay, thank you very much. But, just go to Moria Federation Esoteric Education, and you'll find the playlist there. And there's a lot to study. It's a wonderful book, just wonderful. We consider it sometimes a beginning book, but it's not a beginning book. It's a very weighty tome, and I've been working now. There's about 50. I just finished the 55th program on the rules for magic in the Astral Plane. And maybe I'm partially way through the last rules, so maybe another 15 programs or so will take me there, and then there'll be a little break before we take up the etheric and physical side. And you will also find in our various, our two websites, whichever one at whichever time, you will find the complete commentary on every page of esoteric astrology. I guess there's 160 or 70 programs in there. Lots to study, obviously. And the complete rays and the initiations, it's mostly written commentary, but partially at the end there is a video commentary and a treatise on cosmic fire, mostly written, but towards the end there's some video. Those heavy tomes, I've dared to make a few suggestions about them. And if you really want to get into the Tibetans' teaching very deeply, that's one way to do it. You also see here in the handouts and wait a second, no, it's in the chat box, is the spiritual life channel that Olivia has organized, and the new programs that are found there. Please go there and enjoy, and especially the death, dying and living well, dying well, dying well. Let's see if I have the exact um, uh, title. Okay, I should. Olivia, what is the exact title here? Death and Dying Well. There it is. Okay. Anyway, I was very inspired by it. And at my advanced age of 75, I felt, okay, I felt a little bit encouraged by what Master DK was saying. So I'm sure it will be uplifting. And there is the link for you. I also want to say that we have to avoid paranoia at all costs. There are some students that seem to want to get deeply into what the Black Lodge is. Now, what the Tibetan said about it, okay, I'm going to give you some information, but speculation about them is both futile and dangerous. And, they're trying to locate the influence of the Black Lodge here and there, and naming such people as Franklin and Roosevelt and Eleanor Roosevelt as members of the Illuminati and all that kind of stuff. Look, I just have a piece of advice, and it's not necessarily you people at all, but I just want to be known for saying this: perfect yourselves, clean up the personality, make it soul infused, follow the ancient rules, be filled with light and love and the sacrificial will, and let Shambhala handle the Black Lodge, I'll have to weigh in on that pretty soon, because it can really distract people when they get too involved in that sort of speculation, which DK warned us about anyway. All right, those are the things that I wanted to say for the moment. Now, we are here. My plan is to we've looked at the first three rules of the road. They're wonderful. And I'm going to read them again at the end when we do everything. But now, take notes, think about it. We're going to look at the last three rules of the road, and they are so incredibly practical, even though, let's just say, they are presented in symbolic language. And because the language is symbolic, we may interpret in various ways. And of course, your own interpretation is the main thing, but I'll offer some thoughts, okay? And then we'll have a discussion. Then I'll read the 6 of them straight through without any additional thought or commentary. And then we'll get into our meditation at this time when the prevailing glamours of humanity are just right in our face. So I'm very grateful to Olivia and Tuija for suggesting this kind of work. Maybe I was a little bit tardy in responding, but it is very necessary, even though the real cleanup of glamour is not going to take place for another few hundred years. We've got to clear out the etheric plane first, according to the ancient rules, but we can get started. And when Vulcan is discovered, we will be amazed at how powerfully we can work. All right, number 4. 3 things the pilgrim must avoid: the wearing of a hood, the veil which hides his face from others, the carrying of a water pot which only holds enough for his own wants, the shouldering of a staff without a crook to hold. The pilgrim is the monad, and you are the pilgrim, I'm the pilgrim, and it's the monad in extension. We are the soul in incarnation. Another way to think of the pilgrim is the soul in incarnation. So these rules tell us what we must do and what we must not do. the wearing of a hood. If we hide our spiritual life from others, if we don't want people knowing, prying, understanding our inner process, we deprive them of a lot. Of course, it all has to be done with discretion, but we cannot conceal the well springs of our inner life, as without calling attention to ourselves, it can help so many. On the countenance, on the face, is reflected our spirituality, the state of our vehicles, the state of our integration. And it's possible to go around veiled from others so they don't know anything about what we're doing. But among our friends, our brothers, our sisters, those with whom we work, there is the group gaze, and we have to be open to the group gaze because much can be learned for the sake of the group. This doesn't mean you go around proclaiming what you're doing to people that just aren't interested, couldn't care less, and are not yet at that point when soul pursuits are important to them. So the unveiled quality among those who approach and with whom you work, it's a factor of honesty. Sometimes we are afraid to talk about ourselves in a way that is honest, because we know we're not perfect and we know there are many things wrong, but there are times. Look at what the Tibetan did. He told us about a time long ago when he was a proud disciple. He was a young man, probably means he was an initiate of the second degree, and there was in him something of a power complex, maybe, I don't know. I'm not in a position to say, but he had this fantastic devotion to his master. And that devotion, we assume his master was Master K.H. We don't know when this happened. Did it happen back in the days when they were Pythagoras and DK working with Pythagoras, or did it happen at another time? Because they've been together a long time, but he just had this incredible devotion to the master, so he thought. But the master saw certain things in this devotion and basically understood that DK at the time was quite devoted to himself and thought quite highly of himself as a distinguished disciple, and brought this to his attention, brought this to DK's attention, and DK protested mightily that the master had not seen correctly, and that in fact he was incredibly devoted and he didn't think highly of himself and all the rest, and later, as he tells us, came crashing to the earth of his own weight, because proving the master to be correct. So what's that all about? You know, he shared something about his inner life process. He shared it with us. Why? So that we can learn something about how we operate. And there are other instances where he, I can't find it again, but he says, how people fall in love, and there's different ways of falling in love, and of course love is the main thing. But he said this, I am remembering my brother falling in love, the greatest of all glamours, he said. And I just, okay. So, it makes you think about what love really is and what it means to fall in love and what it means to be in love. So there's this sharing again. He's not hiding his face from others just because he has some flaws. He is willing to admit what these flaws may be for the sake of helping the group and helping others. The carrying of a water pot, to slake the thirst on that hot, dusty, thorny path, which only holds enough for his own wants. Basically, he knows it's a tough road, so he's brought his canteen along, and he's not the Good Samaritan here, this treader of the path, and he's not willing to share. There is spiritual selfishness here. Yes, I know what's required. I'll make it. I can drink it. But what about the other person? No, the person who only carries enough of the restoring, reviving waters for his own needs will not, in fact, benefit the group and is showing signs of a self-centered attitude and will not enter the group consciousness. So we have to think about that. What is our water pot? Now, sometimes water is not water. Water is matter. Water is energy. Water has everything to do with the waters of life. And it's like it's enough if I get those energies for myself, but what about the other person? Well, I'm more interested in me, and the next one tells the story too. And it used to puzzle me. What is this? Because maybe if you're raised in the Catholic tradition, you know what this is all about. But for a while, I didn't know what this was all about. The shouldering of a staff without a crook to hold. Now, if you're going to walk long and hard on the rocky roads, thorny roads, you may need a staff to help support your steps. And it should be a strong staff. And sometimes the magicians carry this staff and it has power. There's other ways of interpreting this. But what's missing? Now, we're told that the Pratyeka Buddhas make a beeline for enlightenment, and they just don't stop for anybody. They just go. They don't need a crook. They don't need that hook that goes like this. Now you've seen it. The Good Shepherd, you've seen it in some of the dignitaries of the church. They carry a staff with a crook, and that crook is to catch the wayward sheep and to help bring them back to the fold so that they don't wander off and get lost and be destroyed and all that. So the crook is a second race sign in this case, and it indicates your interest in others. But if you don't have that, you're just making your own way. Okay, you'll get there and you will be enlightened, but you won't be the bodhisattva. The bodhisattva carries the crook, the staff with the crook. So that may mean, okay, you're going forward, but there's somebody in trouble. You have to stop. You have to use the crook. You have to do what you can in conversation, in prayer, in meditation, whatever it is, to help that person get back on the path. I just talked to a friend the other day, and it's been, I don't know, 5, 6, 7, even 10 years since I've talked to this person, and I found out he had completely lost his faith in the esoteric teaching. And why? Because things went hard for him over a few years, and though he was interested in the esoteric teaching, it didn't relieve the difficulty through which he was passing. I tried to say, look, if things go right, things will go harder yet. So I stopped. And I realized, okay, it's my responsibility now to talk to this person in such a way without, coercing or whatever, to invite the person back into the fold so that he can have the advantages of the great energies instead of wandering out there disappointed because the teaching did not save him from mundane difficulty. It just seems so obvious to a lot of us. You don't expect the teaching to save you from mundane difficulty, but he did. He had the wrong conception. I stopped and I said, okay, now let's have a conversation about this. Half hour, 45 minutes, whatever it was. Let's see if we can make an adjustment. So probably in your life, you're going to have a lot of that as you go along. You'll see people wandering, lost. Maybe they lose themselves after having been found a little bit. And you have to expend all of your power, your knowledge, your intuition to help them. And that may make it seem like you are stopping your progress, but it's not so. If you study the labors of Hercules in Gemini, you realize that Hercules was always having to stop to help in order to find the golden apples. He just wanted to race and find the golden apples of wisdom, but he was constantly compelled or given the choice, would he help or not? And especially in the last 2 of the 5 parts of that labor, Atlas is chained to the rock, and having a terrible time of it. We're all, not Atlas, but Prometheus. We're all Prometheus, and we all have the sacred pains, and the vulture is always ripping at our liver, as it were. He had to stop and free. He had to cooperate with the solar angels. Prometheus is the solar angels, and they had to help liberate the solar angels so that they could go back to their origin. And then even more comes later. He walks along and he sees Atlas, which to me is the symbol of the planetary logos in the entire spiritual hierarchy, and he's groaning under the weight of the world. Well, Hercules is interested in the apples, but no, he pauses, he stops, and he says, okay, I will help you. And he joins the hierarchy in upholding the earth, even though it seems that he is delaying his trip to the golden apples. And what happens? After a while, the burden rolls off him and the apples roll into his hand because he did the right thing, the right selfless thing. So this is what we must not do. And we can measure, we have to meditate on these things, obviously. But if we're in such an all-fired hurry, and I've been guilty of that, Aries people, they just want to rush ahead. They may, well, that reminds me too, it's a beautiful story. Some of you have read, the initiate books, the initiate in the New World, the initiate in the Dark Cycle, supposedly written by a disciple of Master Kutumi, supposedly written by a musician, but really written by a poet. Anyway, variously disguised. But the master, who's called, he's probably an English master of some kind, he's called Justin Morward Hague. And he writes a story called Circuitous Paths. And it's about 100 pages long, and it's got a great point to it. So anyway, the hero of this story discovers his old partner, and she has aged tremendously, and he has two, and they're both tired out, but they decide that they will take the journey to the top of the ever winding path, the path that winds upward all the way. But she can't make it. She's near the top, but she just can't make it. And he's faced with this choice. Do I push on ahead because I can do it, he says to himself, or do I stop and help? And he does stop and help her. And as a result, they both become liberated in the eyes of the master, and they both make it. So, let's think about who we pass by and who we stop and help. And I think that's, in number 4 here, that's an important thing. All right, let's go on a little bit. Now, keep in mind, things that are on your mind, because we'll have that opportunity for discussion in just a little while. Each pilgrim on the road must carry with him what he needs. You don't expect someone to be your golf caddy or your Sherpa. You carry it, you carry it yourself, right? A pot of fire to warm his fellow men, a lamp to cast its rays upon his heart and show his fellow men the nature of his hidden life, a purse of gold which he scatters not upon the road but shares with others, a sealed vase wherein he carries all his aspiration, to cast before the feet of him who waits to greet him at the gate, a sealed vase. DK repeats that, it must be important. So look, we're talking about solar fire here. This is not a pot of fire by friction. This is the warmth of fellowship and comradeship and kindness. DK says, be sweet and kind and good as far as in thee lies. Keep silence and the light will enter in. So the whole idea with solar fire from the heart, we help our fellow men by appreciating them, by letting the love and goodwill be seen. They don't feel out in the cold when they're with us because we have that pot of fire in the heart. I remember once long ago, I was in Aspen, Colorado. I was there with my little kids, and I had stopped at a place, And the lady who ran the place was a German person, and I just remarked on a sign above the desk, and this was a long time ago. This was 40 years ago, and it said "Hab Sonne in Herzen." Hab Sonne in Herzen. It means have the sun in your heart. And I could read that at the time, and I said, well, that's a lesson to me. It impressed me. So what do we do when we're with our fellow human beings? Maybe to have the sun in our heart, use that pot of fire, warming our fellow men, because warmth allows everything to unfold. And, it's not that ferocious heat, which may burn things up, or the cold. No, it's that promotive solar fire and warmth. Okay, a lamp, an illumination to cast its rays upon, again, his heart, what he deeply, deeply desires, and show his fellow men the nature of his hidden life, to set an example so that he lets them in. He lets them know who he or she is. The fellow, the woman you meet, whoever it is, the disciple you meet, the person you meet, can see into you and see your motivations and your deepest desires, and you allow that to happen. You are vulnerable at that point. You are vulnerable because of love. You engage in this vulnerability because it will help the other. There's a lot, we could meditate on that, right? And how you operate with respect to this second sentence, this second proposal. What's it like to be seen? A lot of people were afraid. DK says, look, he said to one of his disciples, you psychologize everybody. Are you willing to submit to the same psychologizing and submit yourself to the group gaze? It was a question. But there is that, it's humility here that allows the other person in and say, we are brothers, we are sisters, we are comrades. Let that person in and we tread together. When DK says, I am your friend DK, he uses the word friend, somehow he's letting people in and he's working very closely with them, not just as superior, although he is that too, everybody recognizes it. Next, a purse of gold, representing the financial support for the whole work, which he scatters not upon the road, but shares with others. Well, we can be prodigal, we can be wasteful, we can spend unwisely, we can have a poor sense of values, we can squander our energy, squander our wealth, squander our prana. Gold is many, many things. But we don't just, we apportion it rightly so that the highest values that we conceive can be nourished. Now, that's the financial responsibility of every one of us. That is the pranic responsibility of every one of us. If a healer squandered all of his or her prana on all kinds of unnecessary things, where would it be when it came time for the healing? So you have to, as they say in the old terms, husband that energy, gather it, keep it for the right giving to promote the things that are in line with the plan. And then, now look, there's more to be said, and you'll say it too, whatever you think is important here. I'm just going through quickly. A sealed vase. He's pretty loaded down. I haven't bothered to think about it. He's carrying a pot, a lamp, a purse, a vase. That's a lot of carrying. Thank goodness it's symbolic, okay? A sealed vase wherein he carries all his aspiration to cast before the feet of him who waits to greet him at the gate. That's the guardian of the gate. That's Sagittarius. That's the master. A sealed vase. It's a warning. Now, we don't want to run around and say, look how devoted I am. Look how much I aspire. Look how much I want the kingdom of heaven. We waste our aspiration. It's like fuel if we just kind of talk about it all the time. And there is in the four, what are they called? The veils on the etheric plane. the veil of impulsion, the veil of distortion, the veil of separation, and the last one is the veil of aspiration. Aspiration is very good when it's like a great fire that drives you forward and upward, but it's not like everybody has to know about that, except when it's wise to show. You always have to be the judge about when you can self-disclose or self-reveal. But if you keep the vase sealed, the aspiration will propel you more and more to do the right thing, learn the right thing, and succeed spiritually in helping more people. Now, at the end of it all, the master waits, and you can offer that when you meet after your incarnation is over, or it's basically laying down the treasure of love before the master and getting ready to have a new vase later. But don't break the seal on that vase, or you will lose your power and not accomplish as much in service as you should. So at least that's my interpretation, and you may have your own. Now, going on, the last one, the pilgrim. We are all the pilgrim. We are the monad making its way through the 5 lower worlds of human and superhuman evolution. All right. It doesn't say the pilgrim as he runs upon the road, okay? Excuse me. The pilgrim, as he walks upon the road, must have. Now here come the symbols. The open ear, the giving hand, the silent tongue, the chastened heart, the golden voice, the rapid foot, and the open eye which sees the light. He knows he travels not alone. It's a wonderful summation, don't you think so? With all due deliberate speed and without rush and without hurry, as we learned in the earlier ones, he walks the road. But the open ear, obviously, of understanding. I mean, can anybody reach us? Will we stop to listen? Do we actually listen? Do we pretend to listen? Do we actually take in what's being said with understanding? Obviously, the students of Master DK somehow expected to be heard, even in their thoughts, and the master would respond appropriately. So nobody can help you unless they understand you, unless they really listen to your story or how you conceive your story to be. Well, the giving hand is obvious. This is the whole essence of service. I remember Mary Bailey talking about the clenched fist. Say it can't receive and it can't give. It's a first-ray symbol, of course, kind of like Vulcan, and she was very first-ray, but basically a second-ray monad she was, and I think coming into that very much. So what do we give? Well, it's not only money. We have so many gifts that we can give, and people need them on different levels. We give our understanding, we give our love, we give our empathy, we give our light, we give our knowledge, we give our sense of synthesis. There's just so many ways to take the vehicles that we have and offer them proportionately to the person, to the group who needs them. So not much, needs to be said about that. I think we do the attracting money for hierarchical purposes. It's on the most material level and very, very necessary. And so we see how people give and take, but that applies to all the different levels of energy that may be within us. Now, the silent tongue, well, obviously, in groups of this nature, criticism is a big problem, and talking about others is a big problem. And DK says so, and Alice Bailey says so. And he says, you hear something bad about a person, DK says. May be true. What happens? He says, you become a cul-de-sac. Whatever came in doesn't get out again. You don't just discuss the person, gossip about the person, whatever. you become a cul-de-sac. Now, that's a hard discipline for the mental types, you know. 3 causes of glamour. We have the very first one is kind of like paranoia. It's suspicion, first ray. Self-pity, second ray. Criticism, third ray. And these are mental groups, and a lot of the people came from the moon chain, and the tongue is a third ray instrument, and it's rather hard to be appropriately silent, occultly silent, to speak when necessary, not to speak when it is not necessary, but basically not to empower destructive criticism. And this is, I think, what is needed. And that conserves energy and strength, of course. The chastened heart, chastised, chastened heart, the heart wants many things. It's the seat of desire. But the heart has to know that only the soul desires count, and it's a disciplined heart which doesn't reach out to things of lesser worth. It does not attract to itself the lesser values and the personal values. It has been disciplined in such a way as to be the organ of the expression of soul desire rather than personal desire. And many a hard lesson is learned here. You say, oh, but I love him, I love her, I love this, I love that. And we have to question what the love is and where it comes from. And it's a tough disciplining which leads to a kind of loving detachment eventually. The heart has to be disciplined. But of course, the heart means many, many things. It means the consciousness. It means the soul. It is not just the organ, the heart. The golden voice, it's a blend of the golden color of the egoic lotus along with the throat center, and you speak the golden words of the soul. You speak the words of the soul, and you don't waste a lot of time with all kinds of talk. You speak those things which really can restore people to their true golden soul nature. The heart is golden in color. The heart within the head has its golden quality. The causal body or egoic lotus has its golden quality. You speak the words that lead to those high centers, and you do it with respect. And he tells you how you have to speak too, you know. You have to give real attention to the formulation of your words. Speak with accuracy. Don't speak in a raucous and coarse manner. Of course, who can obey that entirely? But anyway, gold is the color of the self, the true self. So speak those words that lead to the true self. They are golden words. They are appreciated, and people can really take them in and live with them. You know, famous spiritual quotes used as mantras. It really works. With a rapid foot, well, sometimes you see Mercury with wings on its heels. Now, willing to go anywhere to do what must be done for the sake of the master or the hierarchy. It discusses this, you know, that we have to be ready to change our location immediately and as necessary because the hierarchy may need something someplace. Now, the foot is not just the foot, it can be the projected thought. You can project yourself to other places rapidly and carry out the errand that has to be carried out, but this is the opposite of tamas. This is the opposite of inertia. So we don't just we're not that slug or that couch potato. We're alert. We're ready to go either in person or in the mind or in the consciousness to where we are needed. So if I'm needed someplace far away, I can project my thought, the rapid foot. And the open eye which sees the light. Now, we just had a Science of Triangles work this morning, at least my morning, and there's a whole compilation on the eye of the soul. And I say I'd like to, at some point, go over that compilation with everybody because it's not what we expect. The eye of the soul is not the third eye, and the third eye is not what we often think it is. and the right eye and the left eye and so forth. But the soul is the eye in a way that looks out from between the two. And if we have our eye of Shiva synthesizing the pairs of opposites, we will see the light of the soul, the light of the plan, the light of the triad, the light of the monad, the light of divine will. We will see it. And when does that eye open up? Well, even from the time of the first initiation, it's slowly, slowly opening. By the time the third degree occurs, it should be a semi-useful instrument, and on until it just reveals the inner worlds in cooperation with the eye of the soul, which is found in the head center. And that's a whole nother subject. But, we can see, I'm for this, I'm for that, you're for that, I'm for this, and we fight back and forth. It's like politics. I have my values, you have yours, and yours are bad, mine are good. And the eye of synthesis is missing because the light comes in the reconciliation of the opposites, which are not really opposites, they're two parts of one thing. So we have to open the pineal gland, not so much the pineal gland as the etheric counterpart of it, but it will have an effect on the pineal gland, and that part of the brain where magic is done around the pineal gland etherically. This will give us the open eye of Shiva, the eye of synthesis, the eye connected with the divine will, connected with being, and we just will not be a partial person, seeing, oh, he's the mental type, oh, this person is the sensitive type, It won't be one or the other, it will be both and in a synthesis. And then the final punchline, he knows he travels not alone, and this is repeated in the rules of the road. So it's very important, maybe occasionally somebody has to go it alone. Some of the Pratyeka Buddhas, maybe on the first ray, they really have to, they can't wait, and their mission is thus and so, and who's to judge. But in general, group consciousness, group travel, the grasping of a brother's hand as you go through the actual door of initiation rather than the narrow door, which you couldn't get through anyway because it was a figment of your imagination and you were just trying to get through yourself for ambitious purposes. So now the era of group consciousness has come and we travel together and go through that portal together and experience the accolade of fire together, and that's going to be the way, especially for the first and second initiations, and partially for the third. Later, there's a little more whittling down of the number that can pass through at the same time. All right, so my plan here is that things that seem of importance to you, just bring them to our attention, or if you have any questions and so forth, and then just a reading of the rules without saying anything about them. And if I were you and if I were me, I would read these rules at least once a week. Somehow they're so good, and somehow they're so necessary. And if we want to really tread the path and realize that we are the path, we don't even have to become the path, we already are the path, then we remind ourselves of these ancient stanzas in the old language, and we try to put them into effect. Okay, friends, so now it's your turn. And okay, so here we go, and I see a few hands here and there, and I see Veronique, and go ahead, Veronique. Whoa. Uh-oh. I think, okay. Are you there? Okay, maybe it's a question. Or do you wish to speak first, or shall we read what you have said? Is it not so that sometimes you have to leave to help and not? Yeah, of course it is. And there comes the big decision. Of course, you always have to weigh the consequences of what you're doing. If you know that you can help one person, but if you charge ahead, you can help 10 people. Then it's the greatest good of the greatest number. So it's, there's nothing absolute here, but there has to be the willingness to stop when you're in an all-fired hurry to satisfy your spiritual ambition. So many of us, have that kind of spiritual ambition. He said, look, you're in my group now. What got you here? Was it your love of your fellow men, your burning desire to serve, or was it something akin to spiritual ambition? So I think you understand. Okay, do you have something you want to say, Veronique? Okay. Okay, I'm not sure that we're getting it through here. But anyway, right. Sometimes you have to, there's a lot of, are you there? Are you there? I'm afraid it's not coming through. There's something with the sound system, with your sound system. I'm not sure. Because voice is not coming through and extra sounds are coming through. But it's a good question you've asked, and it's always relative. There's a question always of greater values, and it's not just a question of good and bad, it's a question of better, good, and still better. And he warns us about this, to make ever, what should we say, more discriminative choices. So if your sound system returns, Veronique, we can, and you wish to say something, we can do that. Now let's see, I think Keith, you have something here. Yeah, so let's take a look at that. Okay, just 1 second. Right, so there it is, right? Okay, random thoughts. The pilgrim should not have the pot of water with only his own wants. Right, water, the symbol of the astral desire, solar plexus, and also the waters of space and the various energies which Aquarius distributes. The water of life am I poured forth for thirsty men. It has to do with higher energies found in space in general. So there are many things that can be bestowed, and they are nourishing, except if they're just for you, because obviously we are bigger than just our apparent little selves. Do have the pot of fire, fiery heart, group-oriented for each other's needs, right? Agreed. Staff without a crook. Whenever I see the symbolism of the staff, I think of the spine, and it's kind of interesting how it, hooks around the head even. But there is the spine, as you say, and I think of the spine, first 5 centers, stops at the shoulders, but the medulla, alta major, and the physical symbolism of the antecorona. Let me see if I can get down here. Which, when connected, creates the crook, exactly. Or crook curving around, exactly, around the top of the skull, connecting the pineal, pituitary, and head, and ending in the Ashton center, which turns out to be a big distributing center once the higher centers are open. So that's a very good point. And I hadn't really thought about that before this, but so many of these things have the anatomical analogy if we just look for it. So it's true, we have the staff of the spine and the crook, and sometimes the hats that they wear, symbolize those additional centers which are involved. So the physical analogy is a very good one. So thank you for that. That's really something to think about. I really hadn't, thought about that, and it's true. It's true. But let's see. We always have to say, look, what am I giving up for the people that I'm helping? Now, as a healer, you help a lot of people. So, we have to, oftentimes we have to put our own wants, our own needs to the side, and we have to spend time helping. I found myself at times irritated. Oh, I have to do this now when I want to do that, But it's the lesson of Hercules. You stop and help as best you can when the immediate need is presented. So, it's a good lesson, I think, for all of us somehow. And then the amazing thing is the one who stops and helps, a brother or sister in trouble, finds himself further advanced than if he had just charged ahead. And that's the apparent paradox. It's interesting. So thank you for that thought. That's illumined. Thank you. Suzanne, often I pondered what are the reasons for falling in love, being the greatest of all. Well, it depends on what falling means, you know. It seems as though it may be one of the greatest of all tests, okay, involving sacrifice in many instances. Like I said, falling in love is different from being in love. Being in love, you know, if you think about those words, or being love with another. Falling is, oh, I like this about you, I like that about you, oh, you're so wonderful, you look great, all the rest of it. But those are lesser things, you see. So, uh, a great test involving sacrifice in many instances, and opening up to the renewed way to love. Okay, why not? I mean, we learn as we go. If followed with wisdom, just reread the Initiate series. They are wonderful things because about sacrificial love, there's so much there. So, you know, the Justin Morward Haig, he was very interesting, whoever he really was, you know, whatever English master he may have been, and I think he was an English master. He had a beautiful wife, of course, you know, he never grew old because he could sustain himself at, you know, what's that magical age of 35 or whatever. But he had so much to do that he neglected her, or so she thought, and so she fell in love with someone else, and then was carrying on a relationship with this other person, and Haig caught them, as it were, and oh, he was so apologetic for disturbing them, and he really didn't think of himself for 1 minute. He only thought of her happiness, and of course that kind of attitude, I think, led to her realizing, you know, who and what he really was. But he really was a man for others, and he was always trying to say, look, be selfless in love, because it's not about possession, it's not about desire, it's not about holding another person fast to you. It's all about, you know, caring immensely for their welfare, and he demonstrated that in his own life. And he told that story to a man who was a military man and whose wife had been carrying on with someone else. And the military man just looked at him and with total amazement that a person could have such an attitude. And, you know, wherever he went, his attitude about relationship was curing many people of their possessiveness and their desire for lesser things, and transforming their desire into love. So I never read the Initiate series until a person recommended them so strongly that he just about hit me on the head with the book. And I said, okay, I'll read it. And I was so surprised and so delighted and so uplifted by those three books. So if you have a chance, do get a hold of them and see what they mean to you. Thank you, Suzanne, for your thoughts. Even if we enter into the falling stage, it can transform itself into the loving, true loving stage. Desire and love are not necessarily the same thing. Okay, excuse me. Okay, so Veronique, Suzanne, and Karen. Okay, Karen, go ahead.
Hi, everyone.
Hi.
Michael, this has been very helpful, this discussion into the symbolism here. And I wish that I had heard this before I was struggling to write my paper on this when I was at the Moria Federation. This would have been very helpful. But I have a question. When a group is working together to work on individual glamours, how do they do that? I mean, does each individual work on their own glamour, and then as a group, you know, you do the rest of it? How does that work?
Well, you know,
yeah,
go ahead.
Well, and then my other request is you know, the outline that you use when we do our group meditation. It seems like it's a little different than what's in the book.
Is it?
The format of it. Well, it's arranged differently, or is it not? Maybe it's not.
It's probably not, but probably my elaborations here and there make it seem so. And also, I don't stop that everybody, you know, says their name, and
Right.
There's certain things that I just don't do because we're in a larger group. It's just a time thing. But it
So
is.
I just was wondering if that, if that's possible to have a copy of that.
Oh, sure, of course. And we can even
Okay.
find the page in the book on which you will find that, because it's
Yeah,
right.
well, I know I can see it in the page and I've looked at it, but I thought it was different. That may just not be true.
No, it's not. It's just what I do with it, which is not always exactly what's written, but mostly it is so. Mostly it is so. So I think I'm glad to send you whatever I've got here, but it's basically the same thing. So a little bit difference at the beginning and maybe at the end, and it just has to do with the size of the group, because usually these glamour groups have 4, 5, 6 people in them. It's like that, and it gets quite intimate, and you can do different things, and you can take longer, and you can do all that. So, but here we are sometimes 30, 40, 50. So I just modify it a little bit. Whether I'm justified in doing that, I don't know, but that's what I have been doing. A lot of trust has to be built up in a group, in a small group. And I remember back 30 something years ago, a lot of you know Kurt Abraham. Maybe he's really good Ray theorist and esoteric astrologer. And down in Cape May in the early 1980s, we had a group, and we would quite honestly talk about our particular misuse of energies. You know what I mean? How we did well and how we did not so well. And it wasn't a glamour group per se, it was a Ray group, but we had the trust to get the insights of the other people. It's not that you always have to be into self-disclosure, but if you learn something, you may want to share it with the group. And if there's plenty of trust there, we can work on it. But a group comes together not to do so much the individual glamour meditations as to do the more world meditation, and they keep on working by themselves to clarify their own relation to glamour. Just, when you read about page 120, 122, 123 in the glamour book, it gives us all these Ray glamours. And in the discipleship book, he mentions others, and we probably begin to get the idea of what our particular glamours, our faults of Kamamanus, our illusions may be. And then we are given meditation to work on them. So it's conceivable that we could all get together and work on our individual glamours. You could do a meditation like that, but when you are together, it seems to me the group should focus together on the same subject. And the group can be used, however, to gain additional light. So that's kind of my experience with it, but I'm not saying it's written in stone. You can do it how you want to. It's just that it should not descend into too much personalism. And one should always keep the perspective of the astrological and rheological qualities which lie behind the glamour we may be discussing. And that way we can keep it impersonal and everybody can learn. Because, we're not making it into an encounter group. You know what I mean? Where
Yes.
we're reacting to each other with our solar plexus. It is a listening, the open ear, a listening from the perspective of the soul, maybe offering no advice or reaction at all or response at all, and maybe offering something. But it's all based on trust. And trust is based on working together successfully and selflessly for a fairly long time. So you don't expect a group that's just come together to necessarily have the requisite trust that it takes to discuss what may be going on in terms of a glamour in your life. Yeah.
Would you think that it's better then for each person to start in the beginning with their own glamour?
Well, basically, he says that. He says
Yes.
work it out first, and try to clear yourself to a degree. But you can't clear yourself entirely, okay? But here are the problems you're working with. Try to work that way, and then at a certain point, the group can undertake the more world work. Now here, our world is in pretty difficult situation, and maybe in some respects we jumped into this early, but we did do a little bit of work on the individual glamours. But we said, okay, now we're going to try to work together and do our individual work. And I think that's the best way to operate, to do both, to just always be aware as much as possible of when we may be falling into glamour. And a lot of that is when we exaggerate or minimize things, see things in a distorted and non-proportional way. When we violate the energy of Libra, we're probably, falling into glamour. So everyone will have their own different cues about how they recognize the glamour. And reading the discipleship letters, he just comes up with great stuff about things you wouldn't recognize at all. Wait a second, am I hearing? That sounds like our little.
Sorry.
Okay, dear, I know what's happening. That's Sophie the dog, isn't it? Yeah.
Thank you, Michael. Thanks very much for your help.
You bet, Karen. Okay, dear, go ahead.
Michael?
Tuija, yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
Michael and Karen, I was just wanting to point out about the meditation. It is on the Makara's page where we have the ask programs and the meditation.
Okay, good. And do we have the page number 2 in the
Yes,
glamour book?
I put the link to the meditation on the Makara page in the chat box there.
Oh, fantastic, Theo. Thanks.
It's the PDF of the meditation that you use. You've got the one for individual glamour, the one for world glamour, also the one that you use for the reappearance for the Christ, and the one for money for hierarchical purposes. And what happens when you go to the Makara page, up on the top line menu, you have the Ask events. Click on that, and that's where the meditations are. They're on that home page of the Ask.
Okay, that's going to be very good. I appreciate that. I mean, I have made a little adaptation in this, but for reasons that I consider justified under our circumstances. But when you're working together, and I really would encourage absolutely that you have your own little dissipation of glamour groups, absolutely, then just go through it exactly as he says, because under those circumstances you can do it. Now let's see if I know what I'm doing here. Okay, good. Thank you, BL. That's a help. Appreciate that. Okay, so anything else, friends, before we do our meditation? I think you have to agree that these rules of the road are really wonderful. And I told you the story of my class in Denmark 20 years ago, all the advanced occultists said, "Why are you doing this? This is so simple." And then the group proceeded to crash on the rocks of just about every one of these rules. So, I mean, the group was good and it continued and it did follow through, but there were some tough times, and by carrying out the rules of the road, things would have been a lot better. But although they look easy, we should almost like memorize these things so the inner monitor can catch ourselves when we're in violation. And when we memorize things, it's much easier to catch yourself when you're in violation of a principle. If you don't have to look it up in a book, but it's right in your heart, as they say, learning it by heart. I'm in violation right now, and you know it, and you can stop it or alter it right there at the moment. So that's why, I go through these periods when I do a lot of memorization. Of course, then if you don't keep it up, it fails. But, then you try again and you memorize, and it's in you. And then as you go through your daily life, the principles speak to you at the right moment. So I think that this is really worth committing to memory to make it your own, if I may say. Okay, is there anything else? Because, if there isn't, what I'm going to do is read these just straight through. And Tuija, have you decided, do you want to do that meditation? Have you decided on that? I don't know if
I think the dogs are too noisy.
Okay. Yes. We don't want Sophie doing the meditation. Of course, Sophie means wisdom, and she's maybe the smartest of all the Chihuahuas, but she still hasn't mastered English. So, okay, we'll defer to your wisdom on that one. All right, so here we go. So get yourself in a meditative mood. And as a matter of fact, you know, I'm just thinking, you know, here about I think we could make enough of a meditation out of this, so we didn't have to do the usual thing. I'm a little bit concerned that we would overdo it, you know, and you know, really do too much and then thwart the absorption. So I'm going to read slowly, and I'll tell you what, I'm going to read in a meditative manner. This will be our meditation for tonight, and at the same time, when we're doing this, please think about the condition of the astral plane, and please think about kama manas, which has to be, what can I say, disentangled, so that a pure form of kama exists and a pure form of manas. Think about the violations that are occurring because these rules of the road are not attended to as they should be. And I think that will be quite sufficient. You know, right now we're very concerned about truth. Well, you know the old saying that the devil is the father of lies. So who's the devil anyway? You know, you get the 666 thing going, which is Mars, which is the entire personality wanting its own way, regardless of what is good for the group. So you lie to preserve your own way so that you can continue to do what you've been doing and what you want to do, whether it's good for anybody or not. So a lie is always protective of some lesser state. I mean, that's usually the case. So let's just think about, as we do this, about the ways that we are not true to ourselves. Because if we are true to ourselves and really see ourselves as we are, and don't try to hide from ourselves those unpleasant things which are there for every one of us, then we're going to be a representative of truth. And as a representative of truth, we're going to bring the divine plan much closer to manifestation. So I've never tried this before, but I just get the idea that that's what should be done now. All right, so let's have a little silence. And we will use the protective formula. As a soul, I work in light, and darkness cannot touch me. I take my stand within the light. I work, and from that point, I never move. And the light of the protective cross is there. Now, we are the soul in incarnation, and really, that's just part of what we are. We are also the soul on its own plane, or at least on the higher mental plane, we have a consciousness which is blended with that of the projected solar angelic consciousness. And so let's, from the perspective of the soul, which is the one behind all this more obvious self, we're going to look at how we behave, how we think, how humanity behaves, how it thinks, and try to see the good emerging, the light, the sun, according to the instructions that we are receiving from this ancient section of the old commentary, as translated by Master DK. So all I'm going to do is basically read the words, and it's up to you to ponder a little, and this is just the beginning, because obviously you could take any one of these and make a whole meditation out of it, okay? Rule 1. The road is trodden in the full light of day, thrown upon the path by those who know and lead. Naught can then be hidden, and at each turn a man must face himself. Number 2. Upon the road, the hidden stands revealed. Each sees and knows the villainy of each. I can find no other word, my brothers, to translate the ancient word which designates the unrevealed stupidity, the vileness, the crass ignorance, and the self-interest which are the distinguishing characteristics of the average aspirant. And yet there is, with that great revelation, no turning back, no spurning of each other, and no shakiness upon the road. The road goes forward into day. Number 3, upon that road one wanders not alone. There is no rush, no hurry, and yet there is no time to lose. Each pilgrim, knowing this, presses his footsteps forward and finds himself surrounded by his fellow men. Some move ahead, he follows after. Some move behind, he sets the pace. He travels not alone. Number 4, 3 things the pilgrim must avoid: the wearing of a hood, the veil which hides his face from others, the carrying of a water pot which only holds enough for his own wants, the shouldering of a staff without a crook to hold. Number 5, each pilgrim on the road must carry with him what he needs: a pot of fire to warm his fellow men, a lamp to cast its rays upon his heart and show his fellow men the nature of his hidden life, a purse of gold which he scatters not upon the road, but shares with others, a sealed vase wherein he carries all his aspiration to cast before the feet of him who waits to greet him at the gate, a sealed vase. And finally, Rule 6, the pilgrim, as he walks upon the road, must have the open ear, the giving hand, the silent tongue, the chastened heart, the golden voice, the rapid foot, and the open eye which sees the light. He knows he travels not alone. we imagine a great sun shining upon the astral plane, where so many of these rules are violated. And we see the essence of the rules of the road shining upon the astral plane. Clearing away the fogs, the miasmas, the veils, until eventually we have a humanity which can actually obey the rules of the road and wants to obey them and does obey them. And so with that clarified Son of Truth, Son of Love, Son of Righteousness, we see a great purification on the astral plane, where all of these rampant distortions so present today cannot flourish, cannot grow, cannot find a place. And the light, the love, and the power prevail upon the astral plane and in the world of Kama Manas. Okay, friends, thank you. Memorize the rules of the road and do your best to apply them. I will do likewise, refreshing myself as I once had them under my belt, so to speak. They are a wonderful guide. Tomorrow you'll have to put up with me for a while when it deals with the Ask programs. There's less music, of course, and I just do my best to give you the meditation. We'll be talking about the Soul of Nations tomorrow night at 5 o'clock GMT, and then on Sunday, attracting money for hierarchical purposes. I appreciate your presence. Olivia, Tuija, and I are glad that you return. We thought it would be a good idea to do this. Maybe I was the last in recognizing that it was so, but I think it is, and we will persist. We will persist. We will persist. Okay, lots of love, many blessings, and see you all tomorrow. And yeah, thank you, Yvonne, and Thank you, everybody. Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.